What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And we have quite the show today as we have ourselves the NCAA Women's Volleyball Tournament going on this week. Yes, in 2 more days, 48 teams will be taking the court, but only one come out as a champion. Who will it be, and who are the favorites to win it all? Also, how about Hawaii men's volleyball? They finally won the regular season Big West Conference Championship. But can they win the Big West Conference tournament? And can they win the NCAA tournament? That still remains to be seen. Also, Set Point has a guest today. Yes, and she is quite the familiar face. Who is she? And what will we be talking about? And will it be regarding NCAA women's volleyball? Most likely. All that and more here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for tuning in on this beautiful Monday morning where I'm at. And welcome to episode 85 of Set Point. And it's NCAA Women's Volleyball Tournament time. It's sure to be a fun time. So without any further delay, let's get on into the volleyball action. But first, it's actually time to reintroduce ourselves to a past guest on Set Point. For those of you that don't know, my guest was a former guest on Set Point, as she was the first guest of 2021, and she is the host of Big Ten Volley Talk, and she just recently covered AU Pro Volleyball, AU Pro Women's Volleyball, that is. Without any further delay, let's give a round of applause for our guest, our recurring guest, Miss Emily Ehman. Emily, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Happy to be here. Happy to talk about some volleyball. We're finally getting into the NCAA tournament after, a year and a half? So I'm excited for it to begin and excited to talk about it all with you.
Hey, I'm glad to have you with us. And we're going to have some fun today. And also, I just got to say, great job when it came to AU Pro Volleyball with you, Peyton Chang, and the others. And you all did a top-notch job. I wish I could have been there to fully tune in, but when it comes to NCAA women's volleyball, NCAA men's volleyball, NCAA beach volleyball, and that going on, it's just a lot of things going on at once. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely a lot going on. The season, of course, initially, it was supposed to be when it is, but obviously, didn't anticipate NCAA volleyball kind of happening at the same time. So, of course, next year, we'll have women's volleyball happening in the fall and then AU Pro Volleyball in the spring. And so it'll be a little more split up and easier to digest.
Oh, yeah, I agree. And, this would probably be the time that I wouldn't have too much material. Same could be with the fall. Other than, the men's volleyball season, sometimes I'd even have to talk about high school volleyball on the boys' side and then maybe, a junior college men's volleyball. But now that we all have all this, it's it's a lot to digest. It's a lot to, talk about and divide into coverage. But at least the world is starting to come back together and starting to become somewhat normal. It's going to be a new normal, though, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely new normal. And, yeah, I agree. It was we had no volleyball for so long. We had some teams playing in the fall. But, for me covering Big Ten volleyball, it was okay, we got Big Ten volleyball going on. We have Athletes Unlimited going on. And right when that ends, we get into tournament time. So it was no volleyball into go, go, go. And, as much as hard as it was covering everything, it's been so much fun to see the kind of, different levels of play on any given weekend.
Yeah, I agree. And even though like some of the teams had like shortened season, then some games got canceled, and some games never even got made up, unfortunately. Like at least we got to see like some of the gist of like certain teams that stood out, and certain teams that have continued their success and that are going to be looking to hoist up the NCAA tournament trophy at the end of the season.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, these teams, kind of like you said, have been training for so long and so hard. Of course, we saw, a few conferences and dozens of teams playing last fall, but to see everyone kind of really get going in the spring was so much fun. Obviously for me, it was like so sad not watching Big Ten teams play in the fall. And so having them just go in the spring, it felt like we got, a good sense of where the team is at, whether or not they had, kind of all their games played. But it was super fun watching them. And of course, so excited to get into tournament time now.
I'm really excited. So without any further delay, let's get on into some NCAA women's volleyball tournament time action. But first, let's get the disclaimer out of the way. So these are the thoughts and opinions of myself, Teran Rodriguez, and Emily Ehman, and not the thoughts and opinions of any third, fourth, fifth, or outside organizations. So I just gotta get that out of the way, and yeah, that's the disclaimer. So, Emily, for the floor is yours. When you saw the NCAA bracket, what did you think of of all of the Big Ten teams getting a first round bye?
Yeah, I mean, you have the ones that clearly should have been at the top, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Nebraska. I thought Purdue deserved to be up there, Ohio State. The questionable one for me was Penn State. Although I think when you look at the other teams that make it, they had such a hard season, just playing a conference-only season. They had a lot of games that they missed. The last matchups against Nebraska especially, I think those kind of hit home for me. I was actually supposed to call those matches, but I feel like Penn State, I don't want to say they didn't deserve it because I think they do deserve to be a top 16 seed. But I think they kind of slid in there as a surprise for some. So, I think, of course, Wisconsin being the number one seed right off the bat, that was a really easy choice. And then, Minnesota at 3, Nebraska at 5, totally made sense to me. It's this whole bye situation is just so interesting. You don't play the first round and you kind of just have to scout two different teams and wait to see who you play. I think it'll be an interesting setup once we get to that second round. And, the teams that played the first round are going to be ready to go. They've had a few days of practices, a match under their belt playing in this convention center. So I don't know if the teams are at an advantage or a disadvantage playing in that second round and getting a bye.
I totally agree. Like, the first round bye could be either rest or rust for a certain team. Like, you look, and then you have certain other teams that could have, like, tricky matches. Like, you look at BYU, they could be playing UCLA, and you also look at Penn State. You mentioned Penn State. They could have an interesting matchup if Rice gets out of the first round. But that's if Rice gets out of the first round. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, you saw Rice, take down Texas late in their season. I think Penn State would be up for a really big challenge if Rice wins that first game. I think it'll be a good test for them, but it's the NCAA tournament. So of course it's going to be a test to every team you're playing. Just because it was limited, normally the 64 team bracket got cut down to 48. So automatically these teams have a leg up in just how well they're playing. There's not an additional, that 25% cut. We don't have those teams. So every team that's in this obviously deserves to be there and is playing a really high level of volleyball. And I think, it's possible we're going to see upsets that you wouldn't normally expect. I like that matchup with, UCLA and BYU potentially. I think, UCLA was a team that I think might have thought they were going to get a 16 seed ranking and have that bye. And so I think they're going to be, really ready to go looking to kind of take BYU down. But I think we can see that in another few matchups too. Just, a lot of teams that are really good this season that maybe didn't get that bye. And yeah, like you were saying, it could be rest or it could be rust. I talked to a few Big Ten coaches who, they thought the bye was a good thing. Of course, one less team to play to get where you want to go. But at the same time, you don't have as many practices under your belt. You might not be as comfortable in, playing in the convention center or just, playing out some kinks. You look at a team like Wisconsin that has played one match in the last 6 weeks or something like that. A team for them, it might have helped just to have that first round game.
I agree. And when it comes to like these teams that are playing in the first round, like there are a lot of interesting teams. Like UCLA, you mentioned UCLA. That was a team that was up and down. Like they had a lot of splits in their series, but a few of their opponents, some of their sweeps were like against opponents that I think they should have beaten, in my respectful opinion. And then you have certain teams that are like under the radar, such as South Dakota, which came alive and won their Summit League championship. You also have Dayton, which is primarily a powerhouse team in the ASUN conference. You also have Notre Dame, which I was very surprised to see them as a last four in team. I thought that team deserves a little bit more respect in terms of being a last four team in a team that I think. A team that I think.
I remember watching Notre Dame, especially in the fall. I think just because we didn't have that many teams going in the fall, I think we were like really hyper focused on especially the ACC and teams like, Notre Dame or, other ACC teams like that. And Notre Dame had such a good fall that, I agree. It was pretty surprising. I didn't follow them too much over the spring, but just by the way they looked in the fall, it looked like to be a last four team. And I really did not expect that.
It really sucks because those losses to North Carolina and Florida State kind of hurt their chances. Both of them were 5-set losses. And then also they never got to make up their second matchup against Louisville, which was not really fun for them. And honestly, I think if they had won that matchup against Louisville, they would be ACC champs and it'd be a totally different perspective. So it is what it is. I think Notre Dame is like the sleeper team, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think them, then I think, like we were talking about earlier, UCLA could definitely come up and I think surprise a few teams. But, I think Louisville could have I don't want to say an easier go-around. Obviously, eventually I assume they're probably going to face San Diego in that second round, the first round that Louisville's playing. But, then you could get Washington, who had a really good season, but also I think has a few holes. And, if you remember last year when Louisville took down Texas in that surprise match, nobody was expecting that last year. So I don't know, Louisville could easily, come up, be an Elite Eight, potentially Final Four team if they can try to get past Minnesota. But, like I said, they did it last year. They have a lot of those same pieces. And, they looked pretty good all season.
I agree. And San Diego could present a challenge to them. But it all depends. Like, San Diego's like the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, considering they were also a last four team in, considering they kind of slipped toward the end of their season. They lost 4 out of 6, which was not good for the Toreros. Another team that I think could possibly be under the radar as a team that's playing in the first round is Western Kentucky. Now, that team is not in a Power 5 conference, and that team is currently undefeated. Their only problem is that they don't play in a conference that's really well known. But I like Western Kentucky's chances of at least making the Sweet 16. Because
you said, that team's really good. Obviously, it's not easy to be undefeated no matter whatever conference you're playing in. They had I thought they looked pretty good all season, kind of like you were saying. I feel like that's a team that, like, historically just does really well. They're really used to winning. They know how to win. And I think that does a lot just for your mentality when you're entering a tournament. And you have a lot of young players, especially on, a team that isn't historically, doesn't win a lot. It presents a problem when you get to the tournament. When you have a team like Western Kentucky who just does really well all the time in their conference, whether or not, they're playing in a Power 5 or not. Like, they know how to win. Those veteran players have been there. I think that puts them at an advantage sort of right off the bat, just for having that history and, being undefeated, whether or not they are in a Power 5.
Yeah, and you look at Western Kentucky's path to the Sweet 16. Like, if they get past Jackson State, which I feel like they can, they'd get Washington State. Now, most people probably don't know how good Washington State is, but that's a very young team. I want to say that team has only one or two seniors. Like, they've had to bank on a lot of underclassmen this year, and despite having most of their games postponed, or I'm sorry, not postponed, canceled because they played in the Pac-12, and Pac-12 decided to cancel series matchups instead of postponing them, Washington State hasn't really like had the greatest of all standout wins. They have beaten a few good teams like UCLA and Oregon, but against like a top 10 team or a consistently good team, like, it still remains to be seen. But it doesn't mean Washington State's bad. Like, I just think Western Kentucky might have a better shot at winning, in my honest opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And then, you look at a young team like them and put them against a veteran team like, Western Kentucky has the matches under their belt, has the wins under their belt. They're used to winning. They're not going to want to lose, whether it's a Washington State or whether it's a Wisconsin kind of team. They're used to winning, and they definitely don't want to, lose that one, especially, against a number 15 team. You could say that's, a little bit easier, of course, than when you get into higher ranked teams. But it also would just be really fun to see a Western Kentucky matchup. They're kind of rivals in a sense. They both come, obviously, really good programs in the same state. I think that would be really exciting, just for the state of Kentucky.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. And believe it or not, when filling out my NCAA tournament bracket, I actually have Western Kentucky advancing to the Sweet 16. No offense to Washington State fans. I'm not trying to say that the Cougars aren't good, but I just think that Western Kentucky has a little bit more zip in it, and they've had more consistency this season. Whereas Washington State has had a few of their matches, such as Stanford and Washington, get canceled, unfortunately. Like, it's not their fault, but it is what it is. Like, Western Kentucky just has that it factor, and the fact that them not being in a Power 5 conference and they're still undefeated at this point of the season is still pretty impressive, if you ask me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they definitely could be a sleeper team coming in there, could definitely get to the Sweet 16, would also just be fun to see them there. I feel like, in volleyball we see some upsets, but they're not, typically the biggest upsets you normally would see. But I could definitely see this team just coming out strong, wanting to win, kind of feeling like they're underrated. People might say they're not playing the toughest opponents, but I think they can come out and just look like a really solid, put-together team.
Mm-hmm. And then one more team to talk about before we jump on into the full NCAA bracket is Pitt. Now, Pitt, to me, also is an interesting team in the first round, and to me, they're probably the most dangerous team to, watch out for. Now, for those that don't know, Pitt doesn't have the greatest NCAA tournament history. Like, last year, they were, I think top 10 seed, and then they wound up losing in the round of 32 to Cincinnati, and then the year before, they lost to Michigan. But this Pitt team appears to be hungry. Like, players like Kayla Lund and Sabrina Starks are looking to break that little curse and get Pitt into having a deep NCAA tournament run. Their only problem is that they're on the path of Minnesota, and Minnesota with players such as, like Reagan Pittman and Stephanie Samity, who is the Big Ten Player of the Year, that's going to be a tricky challenge for the Panthers. But Pitt is just a straight-up wrecking ball, and they're well coached, courtesy of Dan Fisher.
Yeah, no, I think especially Pitt, I watched a lot of them last fall, and I loved what they were doing. I think it will be tough for them to get by Utah. You have Danny Drews just going off for them all the time. But I agree. I definitely think that could be a sleeper team. They played so well last fall and kind of carried that momentum through the spring. I think they won all their matches this spring. So they looked really good. It's a lot more put together. Split a series with Louisville, which was kind of a big deal. Split a series with Notre Dame. When Notre Dame was playing really good volleyball. I agree. I definitely think they could kind of come out and surprise people. And I think a lot of people, you look at Pitt and you say, okay, they're playing in the ACC, might not be the strongest volleyball conference, but especially this year, I think we saw in the ACC just a level of play that was a little bit different than, what we had been seeing in the past. And I think, like you were talking about, Kayla Lund, Shanaz Ende, a lot of people on this Pitt team that just look so good.
Yeah, and one more thing to add about Pitt is that, yes, they did go undefeated in the spring, and I think they get a bad rap just because of the fall and how they lost twice to Syracuse. But that was in the first week of the season. Like, everyone was rusty. Even Baylor was rusty.
I think that first week, you kind of just deserve to, sweep it under the rug a little bit. No one had really played a match in, a year almost a year in that point. No one really played in the spring. So just coming out those first matches, I think a lot of people look shaky. And so for them to lose to Syracuse, I think you got to kind of just sweep that one under the rug.
Yeah, and one last thing to point out about Pitt is that schedule in the fall really tested them. Because when they played Georgia Tech, they came out guns a-blazing. And when you compare Georgia's fall schedule to Pitt's fall schedule, there's no contest. And there's absolutely no reason why people should be saying, why did Georgia Tech lose? Because Pitt just was so prepared, having played teams like Notre Dame and Louisville, and then learning lessons from those losses to Syracuse and whatnot. So I think the fall really toughened up the Panthers, and that was kind of the turning point because not a whole lot of teams had trouble with it. Were able to keep up with Pitt. The only team that I remember that took Pitt to 5 was Duke, and Duke unfortunately couldn't close it out, and they kind of fell off in the springtime as well. So there's that about Pitt.
Yeah, definitely a good team. Could totally come up as a sleeper, like you said, in the fall. They just had a really tough schedule. The pods that they were playing in were very, you could say, uneven, and they definitely were the hardest one, with Notre Dame and Louisville, just playing really hard volleyball. I think, those three teams definitely had, I would say, the hardest fall schedule, which, just helped prepare them for the spring that much more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the beauty of the ACC. There are some teams that are up there, like the Notre Dames, the Louisvilles, the Pitts, the Georgia Techs, which Georgia Tech did have a good season, but their season didn't really have too many standout wins. They don't have any bad losses, though, other than that one loss to Miami, which, again, that was in the first week of the season, so we can give Georgia Tech somewhat of a pass. But it's all going to depend on if Georgia Tech can get past Lipscomb, and then if they can get past the Great Wall of Reagan Pittman.
Which is tough to do, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So let's look at the NCAA tournament bracket as a whole. So instead of being a traditional 64-team tournament, it's a 48-team tournament. So I talked about this last week, that how this really hurt Tennessee, Arkansas, Kansas State, Florida State, and Marquette's chances of making the tournament, because Marquette, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Kansas State were the ones that were the first 4 out. So what do you think about the new 48-team bracket, and what are the pros and cons of it, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, when they announced the 48-team bracket, I didn't really understand why. I assume it's a budget situation, but, you look at, they just put on 2 tournaments with men's and women's basketball, full tournaments, where obviously there were discrepancies there, but I don't really get why we couldn't have done a 64-team bracket. It didn't really make sense to me. You left out, of course, the teams you were talking about. The bracket just left out a lot of really good teams that in a normal year would have been in, and, could have been a historic year for the program and for some of those players. So that was kind of, sad, of course, to see a few months ago. But, yeah, I think like I said earlier, it definitely makes the tournament that much harder. Even if you do have a bye, like you were talking about, it's either you're going to be rested or you're going to be rusty. So these teams playing, especially that have the bye, might not have enough time to get really acclimated to the surroundings, playing in a convention center. And all that brings. But I think it makes the level of competition just that much higher. The teams that they selected, especially for those bids that they gave out, are teams that deserve to be there, and the best teams in the country, other than the ones that got automatic qualifiers. So it's definitely going to be a hard year. I think we're going to see a lot of teams just really fighting. They've been playing and training for so long. We had a few months off where everyone had to go home and, trying to, whether that's setting balls against, the side of your house or your garage or what have you. I feel like the level of competition is just going to be so high. And I don't know. Yeah. The bye situation, I think, is just, it provides challenges, but I guess benefits for the teams that get buys. Just looking at the teams there, I know scouting wise is a little bit tough. The games that are the second round games are the games that, the team has a bye in. So those matches are played the day after the first round. So first round is on Wednesday, second round, quick turnaround right on Thursday. So you really don't have that much time to really hone in on one opponent. I know, at least for, most of the Big Ten teams, just talking to coaches and them saying, we really have to focus on two teams right now. Like, we don't have the luxury of, taking a week to prepare for one singular team like they normally do in a year. You finish the regular season typically, and then you'll have a decent amount of time to just prepare for one opponent. And they don't really have that. They're looking at, two different teams trying to either, find similarities that they can just train like that for, or, focusing on specific hitters one day and then a next set of specific hitters the next day. So from a preparation standpoint, it's not the easiest when you're focusing on two different teams and don't have the luxury of just, preparing for one singular team. So I don't know. At the same time, you also don't have to play the first round and, risk losing or, risking something like a player getting hurt or something like that. So in that sense, you definitely benefit from having a bye, of course. You don't have to go through that first round. But at the same time, they could be rusty. They haven't played in over a week, especially if their, last matches of the season were canceled, potentially haven't played in 2-3 weeks. So I don't know. It could definitely be in their favor, of course, not having played. But I think some of these teams also just want to play right now.
Yeah, and honestly, my heart goes out to those teams that missed the NCAA tournament. Like, you mentioned that coaches were talking about how there was basketball that just had a 64-team tournament, while volleyball unfortunately gets 48. And the worst part is for those teams, there's no whatchamacallit. There's no NIVC.
Mm-hmm.
Which means the seniors, unless they take the final year of eligibility, basically go out on a flat note. And it's disappointing, because what if you have a senior-heavy group and you're like, say, Arkansas, who showed drastic improvements, but unfortunately just fell flat on their face, considering you played in a very tough conference. Take Arkansas, for example. Like, they played in this super duper tough SEC, which is home to Kentucky, Florida, and I guess Missouri. And Arkansas unfortunately whiffed on all of those teams, which is disappointing, because it would have been great to see a little variety in the NCAA tournament. And then you also have Tennessee, which wound up losing to Alabama, Arkansas, and Georgia, which, if you take away those losses, then I think Tennessee gets in over Missouri, because Missouri really was shaky this spring.
Yeah, I think it's hard when you have a 48-team bracket, just because, like you said, there's teams that really, would have normally made it in a year, and now you have those teams sitting back, and especially those seniors being like, okay, well, if this year was normal, we probably would have made it. And just having that kind of, I don't want to say regret, but just wish that this could have, been a little bit more fulfilling. And I don't want to say worth all the training that they put in. Obviously, I can't speak for them, but just to think about how hard they've worked and the sacrifices that all these teams have had to make. And then, to not make a tournament just because it was cut by 25%, just, it feels a little unsettling, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And, I agree. So, of the now let's jump to the Big Ten. So, of the Big Ten teams that are in the NCAA tournament and that will be going to the round of 32, which team could be at risk of falling in the round of 32?
The round of 32. I mean, we talked about Penn State a little bit. I think just because they haven't had very many big wins this season. They won against all the teams they were essentially supposed to win against. Lost 2 matches against Ohio State, which I think they really kind of needed to solidify themselves as a real powerhouse this season. They typically are top of the Big Ten, or at least near top of the Big Ten historically. And this season we kind of saw them drop off just a little bit. So I think if you have a Penn State Nittany Lions team against Rice, I think they could be at risk for potentially losing. I don't think they will. I think they've been battle tested just a lot more than a team like Rice has, just with the level of play. But in general, most of these teams, if not all of these teams for the most part, have been playing conference only seasons. So when you look at a conference like the Big Ten and the teams that are playing in the Big Ten, to me, they're just at such an advantage for having such a high level of competition over the last, 11, 12 weeks. So these other teams, yes, they might be playing teams that right now are ranked, but I don't know how well it is or how easy it is to kind of rank teams right now. You see the rankings come out every week, but it's just so hard to cross compare. I don't know. It seems a little like having Texas or, Kentucky in the top 3 to me just seems a little iffy when they're not playing a level of competition to me that, a team like Minnesota or Nebraska has been playing day in and day out. So I think right off the bat, Big Ten wise, they're just kind of at an advantage for playing such high level of competition. But when you look at potential upsets, yeah, I could see if Rice has, the game of their life, kind of like they did against Texas, I could see Penn State kind of struggling a little bit, maybe taking them to 5, and then, it's kind of whoever is fighting the hardest wins.
And something everyone needs to know about Penn State is that they are a very young team. They don't have, they have one senior, but she's a graduate transfer, and she hasn't really seen the floor a whole lot. That's Hannah Flowers, who transferred from Memphis. But other than that, Penn State has banked on pretty much their junior class, which is going to be real dangerous next year. And then their freshman class, we've even had to see a few of their freshmen as well. So there's that. Me personally, I have all the Big Ten teams advancing to the Sweet 16, which, yes, I'm boring, but I just think that most of those teams are battle tested, and I think Penn State should be able to grind it out. But it would not surprise me if Rice actually pulled off the upset to me. And honestly, Penn State's youth is going to be the key factor, and if they can step up. Fun fact about Penn State: in all 40 years that Russ Rose has been at the helm of the program, and correct me if I'm wrong, Emily, Penn State has not missed the NCAA tournament. Again, I could be wrong, but
no, you are correct. They have never missed an NCAA tournament. They are now the only team that has not missed an NCAA tournament, with Stanford not making it this year. They're the only other program that had also never missed an NCAA tournament. And now it's just Penn State. Penn State is the lone one to have made all NCAA tournaments in history. And, of course, Russ Rose, the winningest head coach in all D1 athletics in any sport, is at the helm of that.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, I feel, first and foremost, I feel bad for Stanford. But when I first saw that fact, I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot Stanford didn't make the tournament. But a lot happened with Stanford, and things happen, and unfortunately, streaks were bound to end. And it's a bummer that Stanford didn't make it, but at least Penn State is in alone company. And what was that one stat where they were in the top 10 for how many weeks in a row, or did you miscount? Because I know they've been in the top 25 from now until the beginning of time. But what was that one statistic that they were in the top 10 for?
It was, I'd have to go way back in my notes, but it was something like the amount of weeks that they have been in the top 10 or top 25 was like 9 years. So that many weeks combined, they had been in the top 10 or top 25 for 9 years. So just a historic program.
Yeah.
always at the top of the country, if not, top of the Big Ten for sure. I think this year we're seeing a little bit of dip, but I think I agree. It's just because a lot of these players are really young. They don't have very many seniors at all. They have a grad transfer senior and then a lot of juniors, but they have a lot of underclassmen too that have kind of stepped up and played, really important roles for them. You have Annie Kate Fitzpatrick, an outside who has just been absolutely outstanding this whole season, an Under Armour All-American in high school, but just playing kind of a veteran. I think that's the thing about this team where they do have a lot of underclassmen. The core group of them are juniors, but I think they all play like they've been playing for years. They, especially their middles, Caitlin Horton, Serena Gray, just look good up there.
And I totally agree. And Penn State does have that one win over Purdue. And again, another thing they've had to battle is that they've had to battle cancellations and postponements. Like they were lucky to get that Ohio State matchup in. And something I wish that some of these conferences would do is I wish the Big Ten or Pac-12 and SEC would allow some of these teams to play non-conference games like the Big Ten did. I know the Big Ten didn't have a spring conference because they got the fall conference knocked out already, but they allowed some of these other teams to schedule non-conference matches, and I think that would have been a great iron sharpens iron thing for most of these teams, for the Wisconsins, the Nebraskas, the Penn States, the Washingtons, all that. So
yeah, I agree, but I think especially with the Big Ten, at the same time, I think just from a travel and risk standpoint, it kind of made sense just to stay within the Big Ten. Also, just because the Big Ten is so good, you could go out and play Texas or Kentucky or something like that, but you can also play Minnesota or Nebraska, teams that are also kind of up there. So I think for the Big Ten, it kind of made sense to just not play any non-conference matches just because everyone is so good. And, whether you're playing a Wisconsin or, like Rutgers, Iowa, Indiana, it's still going to be a really tough match.
Yeah, and that's my bad. I totally forgot about travel expenses, about travel risks, and COVID and all that. And I totally forgot about that. But still, it would have been a decent idea. But I understand the risks now, and I think it's for the best that all the teams would just be safe than sorry, in my opinion.
All right. I mean, you look at kind of the Pac-12 and stuff, if like a team like Stanford where, the COVID situation really hit their team hard and injury-wise too, I think that was kind of a good example of, maybe it is good that we're only playing conference matches.
Now, of the Big Ten conference teams, other than Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Nebraska, which they're all top 5 seed. Well, they're top 5 seeds. Which team do you think could have a deep tournament run, other than Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Minnesota?
So choosing between Purdue, Penn State, and Ohio State, I'm going to go with Purdue to go the farthest. And I think I love what Ohio State's doing this year. I think they have an absolutely incredible team. They have a first-year head coach, Jen Oldenburg, Big Ten Coach of the Year this season, her first year as a head coach. And I think that team is so good, but they are really young. And I don't think they have necessarily the experience, I would say, to go really, really far. I think they are very good, but once it comes to tournament time, you have to really rely on your experience and your veteran players who have been there, who have won a lot. I think Purdue, though they do have some younger players, they also have a lot of veterans who have been there and who have gone to the tournament, every single year of their career and who are just always really solid during tournament time. Purdue always does really well during the tournament. And I think with the schedule that they have, they're probably going to see Oregon in the Sweet 16. I think I would definitely take Purdue over Oregon, and then you see them in an Elite Eight, going against a potential Kentucky. And I think Purdue, just how they've been playing, I could definitely see them, upsetting Kentucky. I guess you call it an upset. It doesn't really sound like an upset to me, but I think Purdue could go really far, and I wouldn't be too surprised to see them in the Final Four.
And I agree. The thing that kind of strikes me with Purdue. I think I said this last week. Purdue is my dark horse team to like win it all. But the thing about Purdue is that they're kind of also a mixed bag when it comes to their senior, junior, and underclassmen. They have 2 seniors, but they have 5 juniors, sophomores, and freshmen. But I like how Purdue has been playing as of late. Like, they had 2 wins over Ohio State. I believe those were on the road. Yes, they were on the road, and that's not an easy place to win at in terms of traveling to Columbus, Ohio. So I think Purdue, I can definitely agree that they can knock off Kentucky. My only thing is that can they slow down Madison Lilly, Gabby Curry, the libero, and the Skinner girls, Maddie and Avery. So, but I can see Purdue.
I mean, in terms of like slowing down hitters, though, I think you look at players like Taylor Trammell and Grace Cleveland, both in the top 20 in blocks per set in the NCAA, playing against the best hitters. You know, Taylor Trammell right now is 5th in blocks per set in the entire country. They just have such good defense, and then Jenna Otek, you know, in that backcourt, I think their defense is kind of what keeps them in those games. Obviously, they are very efficient hitting-wise too, but defensively, they are so good. And when you look at, you know, a team like Kentucky and compare Kentucky's offense to Purdue's defense, I don't know. I think I'm going to take Purdue's defense on that one. I think they do such a good job up at the net. And then defensively as well, Jenna Otek is such a good libero for them. Really efficient in her digs, you know, not just getting crazy digs, good ups that, you know, are just up. You know, she's putting the digs in good position to get a good set and third hit out of.
Oh yeah, I agree, and I think, and it will definitely boil down to Purdue's defense. And personally, I think Purdue has a great shot at it. But in order to get to Kentucky, I think they'll also need to watch out for either Oregon or Notre Dame. Like, I can see Notre Dame taking down Army, but the Notre Dame-Oregon matchup is a pick'em. Like, Oregon is making its first appearance. Well, no, last year they missed the NCAA tournament because they had a lot going on. They lost 3 players to transfers, and they were all starters and whatnot. And now they're back in the NCAA tournament, and then you look at Notre Dame, which last 4 in, and you look at I kind of compare Notre Dame to like UCLA. I mean, it's a little early to say that, but as we've been saying, Notre Dame has just had, I think, deserves a little bit more respect after being a last 4 team in. So we'll see, but I think Purdue definitely has a good shot. Regarding Ohio State, I actually have them going to the Elite 8. But my thing is, Florida has a lot of options when it comes to like Thayer Hall, Tara Caesar. I think her name is Ellie McKissock, if I'm not mistaken. I know there are 2 McKissock girls in the NCAA. There's one on Georgia Tech and one on Florida. Either way, that Florida matchup is going to be tough for Ohio State, but you never know with the Buckeyes. Like, no one gave Ohio State any sort of credit this year. I think they were chosen 6th in the Big Ten, and they wound up finishing, what was it, 4th? 4th in the Big Ten?
Yeah, I mean, they just had an outstanding year. Yeah, they ended up finishing 4th in the Big Ten, which I think, you know, I think people would say they were surprised about, but that team definitely would say that was not surprising to them at all. You know, they kind of knew coming into the season it would be a little bit different for them. They were going to have a good season. I agree that Florida-Ohio State matchup is going to be really fun. I think it's 2 teams that both have done really well. I think, you know, they also both have some holes. I think we saw Florida this season have, you know, a few losses that we might not have anticipated. But I think that Ohio State-Florida matchup will be really fun. And if Ohio State can kind of get out of that one, you know, we're assuming they're probably going to see Wisconsin in that Elite 8 matchup, which also would be super fun.
Yeah, and the thing about Wisconsin versus Ohio State is that neither of them met each other. They weren't even on the schedule, which I don't know the exact reasoning for it, but it would have been great to see Wisconsin versus Ohio State at least one time in the season. Unfortunately, I don't know if the schedule played out like that or something along those lines happened, but either way, that's my Elite 8 matchup, Wisconsin versus Ohio State, if you could weigh in on that.
Yeah, no, I definitely think, I would say I'm going to take Ohio State over Florida in that one, and I agree. I think Wisconsin's going to come out unscathed. I wouldn't even be surprised if they lost a set up until that point. But yeah, the Wisconsin-Ohio State matchup, I think, will be one that'll be really, really fun. Those two teams, of course, have had really good years. They didn't play each other during the regular season. So I would love to see them go head to head. I want to see Ohio State, really get tested again and see how they do. They lost those two last matches of their season against Purdue, which, Purdue had outstanding matches and they were all really close, but watching a Ohio State-Wisconsin Elite Eight matchup, I think, would be probably the highlight of my tournament. Now that I'm thinking about it, those teams both are just really good hitting efficiency-wise. And, of course, Wisconsin's block is incredible with Dana Rettke up front. But those two matchups, or that one matchup with those two teams, I think would be really, really fun. And, of course, you have a big name like Wisconsin. You have the Ohio State University going up against each other. Just for fans, I think people are excited to see it. Ohio State has had so much momentum this year. And so to watch them against, the number one team in the country in every single poll, the number one team in the Big Ten, kind of this giant that they haven't had the chance to go up against, I'm really excited they were matched up like this so we can potentially see them in that Elite Eight.
Now that we mentioned Nebraska has quite the path to get to the Final Four. Like, they face Texas State, which I'm certain they'll be able to take them. They'll be able to beat them. But if they get out of that first round, they could see either Pepperdine or Baylor. Now, Baylor is an interesting team. They lost to Texas State in the last game of the season, and then they have not had an answer for Texas. And I don't know. Like, Baylor does have the reigning National Player of the Year in Yasonia Presley, and they also have a few other players like Cara McGee stepping up, and I believe her name is Lauren Sanders stepping up. But can they really stack up to a Nebraska team that returns almost all of its players? That's the big question.
I think Nebraska right now does not have a lot of holes in its game. I think they're really comparable to Wisconsin, just a little bit. I don't want to say less good. I think Wisconsin just a little more fine-tuned. I think Nebraska has all the keys to be a, potential national championship winning team. They have three players who made the all Big Ten first team with, middle blocker Lauren Stivrins, outside Lexi Sun, setter Nicklin Hames, who all made it last year. They all are just such a good, well-rounded team that I think they're pretty hard to beat. Stivrins right now is fourth in the NCAA in hitting percentage. Lexi Sun leads that team in kills per set, just absolutely lethal, transferred from Texas after her freshman year and just instantly kind of made a splash for that team. And yeah, you look at their first round matchup, I'm assuming it'll probably be Texas State as well. But I don't know, Texas State could challenge them. Texas State has played the most matches of any team in the country right now. They won the Sun Belt, last fall, their third year in a row. And then, potentially seeing Baylor that next round also could give them a little bit of a hard time. So it's not going to be easy for Nebraska. Texas State could challenge them, although I definitely think Nebraska will come out on top. But yeah, then you get a hard team of Baylor, who, had close matches with Texas and is a just really good, well-rounded team as well. I don't know. I'm going to pick, of course, Nebraska to get out kind of unscathed. I don't see Baylor taking them down, but if they did, I would be pretty surprised. And then, you move to the Elite Eight and you're potentially seeing a Texas-Nebraska matchup or a Penn State-Nebraska matchup, which to me would be really fun to watch them go up against Texas. I think those two teams are pretty evenly matched, and to watch them kind of go head-to-head with the power hitters that both of them have would be really fun.
And I believe the Nebraska-Texas matchup would kind of be a rematch of the 2015 NCAA championship match, or was it 16? I lost track.
The one that Nebraska won, that would have been, 2015.
Okay.
And then, they want to get in 2017, but I don't believe that was Texas. But yeah, I think those two teams too are so historic in, of course their conferences, but just in the country. I think people love Nebraska volleyball, of course, and then people love Texas volleyball. And so watching, them kind of go at it. It's a Final Four matchup that we've seen a few times over the last few years. You talked about that national championship match. Texas is pretty used to being in an Elite Eight and a Final Four. They've obviously won a ton this season, and so watching them go up against someone like Nebraska would be really fun. I don't think Texas has necessarily been as battle-tested as a team like Nebraska has, but they also are used to winning, just kind of the same as Nebraska has, and they look really good. They don't have a lot of holes in their team as well, so watching them kind of go head-to-head would be really fun, assuming, or, maybe if Texas can and beat Penn State, which I would probably pick them to beat Penn State.
Yeah. Again, nothing against Penn State, but Texas is loaded other than that one game against Rice. Like, one could even argue that Texas might have looked ahead to that fourth matchup against Baylor and then forgot all about Rice, because Rice was the biggest trap game for Texas, and that could have been a mistake having that, but you obviously want to have that annual matchup against Rice, especially in these uncertain times. But
definitely,
yeah.
I think when you think about that Rice game, it was on a Tuesday, right? And then they played Baylor on that Friday. So I agree, it could have been just, looking past Rice, thinking, oh, that's going to be an easy win for us. Let's, think ahead a little bit to Baylor. Obviously, huge rivalry match for them. And I don't know. I think you could argue, that Texas might have been overlooking Rice a little bit. Just kind of slipped up. Obviously, it was a 5-set match, so really close. But yeah, I think that one, I don't think that was necessarily representative of who Texas volleyball is this season. I think it was just kind of a bad loss. I think Rice played out of their mind. Texas just looked a little, I don't want to say under the weather, but just not as good as they normally would have.
And now that I also mentioned Baylor could be at risk of possibly losing in the second round. I have them going to the Elite Eight, but a team that Baylor probably doesn't want to see is Pepperdine. Now I don't know if you know much about Pepperdine, but Pepperdine has had probably the best season of probably like forever, as Pepperdine beat BYU for the first time since 2012. Pepperdine does play in the first round against UMBC, but if Pepperdine does get past UMBC and gets Baylor in round 2, Pepperdine knows what to expect from Baylor, considering they took them to 5 in the spring, and I think that was very impressive by Pepperdine, and I think Baylor could, hence the word could, be at risk, but you never know. And one thing to also note is that this game, the entire NCAA tournament is being played in Omaha, so guess which team is nearest in Omaha? Nebraska.
Nebraska, yeah. They don't have too far to travel. They're very excited about playing in Omaha in front of so many of just their home fans. People can go to the Final Four matchups, and so I think, if Nebraska can get there, there's going to be just an outpouring of Nebraska fans. I'm actually headed out to Omaha on Saturday to help cover for Big Ten Network, and I'm so excited to see all the Nebraska fans, outside. I think we're going to try to hit up some of the local sports bars and watch, Nebraska fans watch Nebraska volleyball. It'll be really fun because they show out.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Nebraska has a very passionate fan base, very passionate. So, my question to you, Emily, is this: if you had to choose between Wisconsin and the field, which would you take?
I would take Wisconsin pretty much any time, I think. I think they've proven this year that they are a really, really elite volleyball team. They don't, like I said, they don't have very many holes at all, if any. They just look so good up front. They have Dana Rettke up there, obviously an outstanding middle. Setter Sydney Hilly is just an outstanding setter, a good blocker, good defender as well. I don't know if there's teams that would necessarily test them too much. I kind of want to say Wisconsin, to me, looks like Stanford did last season in just how dominant they were. I wouldn't be surprised to see Wisconsin have a lot of sweeps up until, the Final Four potentially. They are just a team right now that is so well-rounded. That team is so, tight-knit that they're just so much fun to watch right now. And I think they had a really good spring season, kind of despite having not played the amount of matches that they wanted, only 3 in the last 6 weeks or so. But I really love what they've been doing. Coach Kelly Sheffield is just really excited and proud of this team. I don't know. Dana Rettke was saying the other day how that loss in the tournament last year, they've been using that as motivation for this entire season. They lost to Stanford 0-3 in the championship, and they still think about it a lot. Of course, they're not going to see Stanford this year at all, but they're really excited to just use that as motivation, get back into it, and, fight for the chance to hold up that trophy this year, because they kind of, it was a letdown last year for them.
Yeah, and I think Wisconsin's kind of like the Chicago Cubs of the tournament. Like, not like that far, but not with like not that far. But I think Wisconsin's just been long yearning, and they've had chances where in the past where they've made the NCAA tournament championship, but unfortunately have fallen. And last year is a prime example. And if I've pretty much been saying this, and you've pretty much been saying this, if there's a year where Wisconsin women's volleyball has to win the championship, it has to be this year, because you look at their team. They have, how many All-Americans did they return? 4, or was it more?
They returned a lot of them. I can't think of exact numbers, but like their team is just so stacked that it is like every position, like they have someone that is probably the best in the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to say it's like 4 or 5. I know they have like 8 seniors, and they have a loaded freshman class. But next year could be a little if you ask me, when it comes to like returning players. But this is the year that Wisconsin can win it all. And I totally agree. I think I'd take Wisconsin over the field. I don't think it'll be as easy as most people say, because Texas is challenging, and then Ohio State is kind of a dark horse. And then you look at the other side, which has Minnesota, which knows how Wisconsin plays, Kentucky, which is loaded, Purdue is most likely itching to get back into another crack at Wisconsin. And you also have teams like Washington, which has like Samantha Drexel, which I remember she played at Maryland, and I don't know if you've seen her play at either Maryland or Washington, but she's a dominant outside hitter, and I wouldn't mind seeing a UW versus UW matchup, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think, that'd definitely be fun. Yeah, Sam Drexel was an incredible player. I remember watching her at Maryland and, of course, at Washington now, and, leading that team to be really good. I don't know. I don't know if there's a lot of teams that are, like, as good as Wisconsin. They played a matchup of Minnesota a few weeks ago and won 3-1. They swept Purdue the first 2 matches of the season. Obviously, everyone is getting going, and, they might not have been super ready to play, but I think they just look so good this year, and it's hard for me to think of, a team that could potentially beat them. They've only lost 3 sets this entire season. Of course, they haven't played, just as many teams as other people have. They've only played 15 games this year, but only losing 3 sets in a Big Ten schedule is still incredibly hard.
Indeed, because it's a nightly basis, and it's a battle within the Big Ten no matter who you're facing. Even Rutgers had improvement this year. And I remember they ended the season on a 4-game winning streak, which that just goes to show you the depth of the Big Ten and how there's talent all over the place in that conference, and that there's no easy nights when it comes to like conferences like the Big Ten or the SEC or heck even the Big 12 or whatnot. Like these Power 5 conferences, if you're able to be a perennial powerhouse in a Power 5 conference, then hats off to you.
And I think that just puts them at such a good advantage for this tournament, kind of like I was saying earlier, but they're playing teams day in and day out that are so tough. They're not allowed to take any matches off, no points off even. And so having that high level of competition just gives them such an advantage headed into this tournament when you're playing teams that really deserve to be there and are really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when you look at Nebraska versus Wisconsin, that would be a fun matchup. Like, if if we get Wisconsin, Nebraska, I think Big Ten Twitter is going to lose their minds. And if we get an all Final Four for women's volleyball final with Wisconsin, Nebraska, just my honest opinion, Minnesota and Purdue, then once again all the Big Ten volleyball fans would lose their mind.
Oh, that would make my year. That would be so fun. And I've said this for the last week or so. I really wouldn't be that surprised to see that happen either. I think, it'll be a tough road for, Nebraska beating Texas, and then if Purdue can knock off Kentucky. But I definitely think it wouldn't be surprising, of course, to see Wisconsin and Minnesota in the Final Four. And then I wouldn't be surprised to see Nebraska or Purdue in there as well.
Yeah, that Nebraska-Texas matchup, if both teams get to the Elite Eight, would be kind of a pick-em if you ask me, because you have a Nebraska team that has all of its players returning, and then you have the Texas team that's looking for redemption after losing in the Sweet 16 to Cincinnati. And so, I'm sorry, not Cincinnati, Louisville. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of Pitt. I get Cincinnati and Louisville mixed up.
That's fair. They're close.
Yeah. But anyway, are there any other matchups you want to look at, or any other teams that are worth looking at, or any teams that are not to be underestimated?
You know what? I feel like we covered them. I know we talked about Mizzou a little bit. I think they also had a pretty good fall. I didn't watch them too much this spring, but I don't know. They could give Ohio State a run for their money if they can get out of that first round.
Yeah. Looking at the Missouri-South Dakota matchup, that is an interesting matchup because I briefly talked about it, but South Dakota really came alive in the latter part of the Summit League. They obviously lost a 5-set. Yeah, they lost to Kansas City in 5 sets. And the thing I feel bad about South Dakota is that they didn't get that second matchup against Denver, but I guess it truly didn't matter because South Dakota actually beat Denver in the Summit League Tournament Championship. But the thing about South Dakota is that they actually didn't get that second matchup against Denver, and they beat Denver the first time. And had South Dakota beaten Denver, or if that matchup had gotten played between Denver and South Dakota, Kansas City, and Denver would be regular season champions, and that would cause a lot of craziness atop the Summit League tournament and whatnot. But that Missouri-South Dakota matchup looks really interesting. I picked South Dakota to come out of that matchup just because Missouri has a lot of inconsistencies. I know they have some good wins, but some of their losses, or some of their matches that went 5, really boggled my mind. They had to go 5 twice with LSU, they had to go 5 with Ole Miss, they had to go 5 with Arkansas. They lost in 5 to Tennessee, and they got swept by Tennessee. They were up 13-10 on Florida, and then wound up losing 15-13 in set 5. So that's kind of my thing about Missouri that kind of has me concerned. Is Missouri consistent enough to defeat South Dakota? And if they get out of the first round, can they beat a red-hot Ohio State team? That's my thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, regardless of who wins that match, I think, in my opinion, Ohio State can handle both of them pretty easy. So, in that sense, it's more of a question of who does Ohio State have to prepare for, and how quickly can they beat them.
I agree. And looking at all the other rest of the matchups, I think like I said, or like you said, I think we've pretty much covered them all. I think another team to somewhat watch out for is Georgia Tech, but again, if they'd have to play pretty much perfect if they want to get past Minnesota. And I think the same can be said for Creighton, because Creighton always has a decent tournament run. They always give teams some sort of fits, but I don't think they have the depth to go all the way, because even if they get past Florida in the round of 32, they'd most likely take on Ohio State or South Dakota or Missouri, and then they're on the path of Wisconsin. That's what makes their path to the championship really tough, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that, top left section of the bracket, it would not be easy to be any of those teams just because, looming, you're probably going to see Wisconsin. And in that sense, you're probably going to lose.
Mm-hmm. All right, so do you have anything else you want to add regarding the NCAA tournament or anything else you feel the need to talk about before we close the book?
I think I just want to say, all these teams, it took so much for them to get here, and I'm so proud of all of these teams for, having the strength and the grit just to get through the season, and to the teams that didn't make it. I think this season was very unprecedented, as everyone keeps saying, but I think they made so many sacrifices to get here, not seeing friends and family all year, not seeing significant others, stuff like that. And just to get to this point, I think each team should be so proud of just getting here.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. And again, and other than Nebraska, like some of these teams are going to be playing in a bubble. And for those that don't know, like there were other bubble teams, like there was the bubble in the NHL, the bubble in the NBA, and it's going to be tough for college students, like having to play in a bubble. But honestly, the tougher the challenge, the sweeter the reward. That's my kind of MO. But it is going to be tough for college students.
I was talking to some of the Wisconsin players the other day, and there's been a lot of doubts, like you didn't move to win this year because you didn't play as many teams, or the year is really weird. If you win, it should have a little asterisk next to it. And they were saying that just because of the sacrifices they've made, it's made this year so much sweeter. It makes it so much more worth it that they got to win the Big Ten, just because they've had to give up so much. And so while some people may say, this season shouldn't really count, I think it counts even more just because of how much they've had to give up and what they've had to go through to get here. And that's not normal in a normal year. So I think just with this season, these teams are, emotions are going to be really high during this tournament. You're going to see a lot of teams competing. They've been waiting for this opportunity for, over a year, almost a year and a half. So we're going to have some good matchups starting Wednesday.
I agree. And I really cannot stand those people that say there should be an asterisk or this will be a Mickey Mouse title or anything like that. A championship is a championship no matter what the circumstance is. It's like, it's so tough to win in a tournament such as this because you basically have to play perfect throughout most of the way. And I don't know, it really just frustrates me seeing Mickey Mouse title or asterisk, or it's like, come on now, just sit back, relax, enjoy the ride, and appreciate greatness. Like, please don't be that type of person. It really is frustrating.
Yeah, definitely. And all these teams deserve it, like I was saying.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but on that note, I thank you, Emily, for joining me on Set Point this week. It really means a lot. If you could hold so I can give you a proper farewell, that would be awesome. But before we go to a commercial break, Emily, did you want to plug in your social media info and all your shout-outs and whatnot?
Yeah, definitely. Follow along. Like I said, I'll actually be in Omaha covering the NCAA tournament for Big Ten Network for their digital side. So if you want to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Emily Ehman, my name, EMILYEHMAN. Give me a follow and then follow along while I'm at the tournament. I'm really excited to be there. It'll be interesting to see what the setup looks like and to, get to see some of those teams in action live.
Hey, best believe we'll definitely be watching and getting all the info, and we'll definitely be hoping for the best regarding you and Big Ten Volley Talk. But on that note, thank you once again for joining me, Emily. We will take ourselves a quick little commercial break. When we come back, I'll be talking some NCAA men's volleyball and how Hawaii pretty much clinched the Big West Conference men's volleyball regular season championship. So you're listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hey guys, it's Blake Henley, better known as H-Town Blake to some of you. Happy to announce that Faces Loaded is back in full force. We'll be bringing that high heat every Tuesday night here on IE Sports Radio. So come home, get ready, dig into that batter's box, and see if you can to chase that high heat, baby. So we'll be coming to you live with all the stats, all the rundowns, all the division rivalries, and every team that's going to make the playoff push to get to that one and only October and get to the pinnacle of what baseball is, to hoist that Commissioner's Trophy when it's all said and done.
What's good, fight fans? It's your boy, Marcus Los Great, here to give you what you want, here to give you what you need. Yeah, man. Yeah. I'm coming to you live, straight from your mama's basement with a crispy, awesome white tea. We are coming to you live every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Powered by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hey sports fans, do you like wine? Well, we've got the show for you. This is Let's Wine About Sports, a show where we talk about wine and sports simultaneously. From the classic Cabernet Sauvignon all the way down to the grapes that you've never even heard of before. Oh yeah, we cover it all. And we'll talk about a little bit of sports as well. Football, hockey, collegiate, women's sports, it doesn't matter. We're going to talk about it all, and we're going to whine about it all. So join me Monday at 8 p.m. on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Back with segment 2 on Set Point. You can check out all of our amazing shows here on IE Sports Radio. You can check out Let's Whine About Sports from Mike Pat, who unfortunately had the weekend off, but he should be back next week, and I'm looking forward to hearing him and what wine he's going to be drinking. Also, check out Marcus Sloth's great show, Gloves Off, every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Pacific Time, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Also check out Bases Loaded with Brandon Buckingham, Blake Henley, and Chris Garcia, as that actually went on yesterday, as Brandon and Chris talked about the second week of the MLB and what went on. And that was cool, and you should definitely check it out. So there's that. Alright, but now let's get on into segment number 2 with Set Point. First and foremost, I gotta give a shout out to Emily Ehman for taking time out of her day to being a guest on Set Point. It really means a lot, and I really love her insight, especially with the Big Ten, so let's give her a round of applause real quick. yeah, definitely got to give her that little applause button. So now we are going into segment number 2 for Set Point. But first, before we do that, we got to get into our sponsors. So IE Sports Radio has 2, count them, 2 sponsors. As I also got to give a shout out to Larry B., who was listening in on that interview. He said it's a bummer that the NCAA women's volleyball tournament got cut to 48, and he also said that Wisconsin women's volleyball and Wisconsin women's hockey are amazing teams, and he liked the interview, or he really liked the interview. So thank you, Larry B., for tuning in. Gotta say hello to Davidson Crooks, who popped in and says, "What's good?" Appreciate you tuning in, brother. He also had himself a great show with Fast Break with himself and Dentarius Locke yesterday. And I don't know about you, Davidson. I don't know if you're still listening, but I would like to know what you think about shortened tournaments and how, if every team should have the same equal number of tournaments, or they should still have their traditional tournament. Because I, for one, don't like the new NCAA 48-team tournament as opposed to the 64-team tournament. It really hurts teams like Arkansas and Tennessee, which are basically SEC teams from Davidson's neck of the woods and whatnot. So, just saying. But great to have you in the chat room, Davidson. Now let's get on into the IE Sports Radio official sponsors. So the first sponsor for IE Sports Radio is Legacy Financial. 2020 was indeed a tough year. But staying positive, keeping your faith, and continuing to work hard is the goal. If you're in a financial struggle at the moment, you're doing well and you want to get to the next level, or you want a new opportunity to work for yourself and earn more money part-time, give IO a call at 510-928-2104 to book your appointment today. Io and her husband Andrew are just 2 people on a mission to help families build a legacy, because every family needs a legacy. You can follow them on Twitter at legacy_uncut. And you can follow them on Instagram at Sims_uncut. So iSports Radio's second sponsor is Southern California Warriors, a semi-pro football team. The world of semi-pro sports is unlike other sports organizations. Players pay to play in hopes of so many different outcomes, whether it's playing to get film, to try out for professional teams, big-time colleges, or just playing to stay in shape. No matter what, all semi-pro players have one thing in common, and that's playing for the love of the game. The SoCal Warriors have been on a quest to earn titles and give players second chances since 2017. Whether you're in Southern California or anywhere in the world, give semi-pro sports a chance if you love your sport. You may get that second chance you have been waiting as an athlete. That is our newest sponsor of IE Sports Radio, by the way, SoCal Warriors. I talked about them a little on the SoCal Supreme Sports Show this past Friday, but that was just like a little gist of it. That was like eating the crust of the big pizza, as this is pretty much the big gist. So anyway, you can follow SoCal Warriors on Twitter at SoCal Warriors. Then you can follow them on Instagram at Southern_California_Warriors. And you can also follow them on Facebook at Southern California Warriors. So just type in Southern and then the word California, then Warriors, and then boom, hit the enter button, and then you'll get them on your search feed. So there's that right there. All right, now let's get on into segment 2. I won't be going too long just because there wasn't too much regarding NCAA men's volleyball, but there were a few notable things. So, first and foremost, Hawaii clinched the Big West Conference regular season championship, and they've clinched the number 1 seed to the Big West Conference tournament. So, Hawaii defeated Cal State Northridge in 4 sets on the first night, and then they swept Northridge the second night. And this wasn't too surprising. Like, I've been saying we shouldn't sleep on Northridge, but that's only for, like, the lower teams. Like, the upper teams, like Hawaii, Long Beach State, and Santa Barbara, they know what they're doing when it comes to facing Northridge. I'm not trying to say that UC Irvine doesn't know what they're doing, or UC San Diego doesn't know what they're doing against Northridge. But I will also say this, that the Rainbow Warriors are officially Big West Conference regular season champions. And it's actually the first time the the Rainbow Warriors have been considered, or it's their first time since in I think their team history that they've won the Big West Conference regular season championship outright, and it's quite astounding if you ask me. Like I think it's a long time coming for them, and they definitely have earned it. Like no team can catch up to them because Hawaii has two more matches remaining. They face UC Irvine, and even if Hawaii drops those two matches, they'll still be conference champions in the regular season. So there's that right there. UC Santa Barbara and Long Beach State are both tied for second at 5-3. If UC Santa Barbara or Long Beach State win their next matchup, they should lock up the 2 and 3 seed respectfully. So UC Santa Barbara plays UC San Diego on Thursday. I'm sorry, not on Thursday. They play them on Monday, and then not Monday. UC Santa Barbara plays at UC San Diego on Wednesday. Then they play them on Thursday. Then they play them on Sunday. It's quite the. I'm sorry, Saturday. Let's start this over again. UC Santa Barbara plays at UC San Diego on Wednesday. Then the two play each other again at UC San Diego on Thursday. Then on Saturday, UC San Diego goes to UC Santa Barbara to face UC Santa Barbara in a conference game. So that second conference game between UCSB and UCSD, that's not going to count toward the record of the Big West Conference. It's going to basically be a non-conference matchup. So there's that right there. And then Long Beach State plays Northridge on Friday and Saturday, I want to say. And I believe one matchup will be at the Pyramid and one matchup will be at Northridge. Yes, the Friday matchup will be at Northridge, and then the Saturday matchup will be at the Pyramid. So there's that. Long Beach State just recently swept UC San Diego, which isn't too surprising, even though the Tritons are a talented team. And then, like I said, UC Irvine closes out against Hawaii, which it's going to be at Hawaii, and no team has had an answer for Hawaii. The only team that has come close to beating Hawaii was Long Beach State, but unfortunately Long Beach State just couldn't because reasons. So the Big West Conference is basically going to be Hawaii versus everybody. Like, if Long Beach State I think has the best chance of beating the Rainbow Warriors, but they really cannot afford to like complain about the noise level. Like, just go with it. Like, I'm not trying to bash Allen Knipe or Long Beach State, but just go with it. Just move on. Like, who cares if it's loud? Like, be thankful they're having like sound effect noise and not like an actual crowd. So just saying, y'all. And then when it comes, I believe the tournament format will be 3 versus 6, and then 4 versus 5, which means Long Beach State could get Northridge again in the Big West Conference tournament, and then UC Irvine and UC San Diego would be facing off in the first round, which the winner of that match would face Hawaii in the semifinals. Whereas UC Santa Barbara would get a first round bye. But to me, I think I wouldn't be surprised if UC San Diego beat UC Santa Barbara, just because San Diego does need at least some sort of conference win. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if San Diego defeated Santa Barbara in conference play. Like, if they get a conference game off of UC Santa Barbara, then that's crucial for the Tritons, considering they haven't had too many standout-ish wins. They've beaten Irvine, but Irvine has been less than average. Or, I'm sorry, not less than average. They've been average pretty much all season. They even lost to CSUN, which I don't know what you're doing, UC Irvine, losing to that team. No offense to Northridge, but again, they weren't the team that no one was going to pick to win the Big West Conference. I do admire that they did take a set off of Hawaii. That's not easy. Just saying. But I will say this about Irvine. I don't really see Irvine having a good shot at beating the upper teams. Like, they were lucky to have even taken the first 2 sets off of Long Beach State, but unfortunately for the Anteaters, I just don't see them going far. Long Beach State and has the best chance of knocking off Hawaii, and then Santa Barbara, unless they can figure it all out, I don't see them knocking off Hawaii. And it'll be interesting to see what could happen with the second place team of the Big West Conference, or the runner-up of the Big West Conference tournament. Like, I can see maybe one team from the Big West Conference making it to the NCAA tournament, because you look at the representatives that get to make the NCAA tournament. You have Hawaii, which will most likely win the Big West Conference. You have Lewis, which will most likely win its conference. I think it's called the MIVA. Yeah, something along those lines. You have either, Penn State or NJIT possibly winning their conference, the EIVA. And then you have most likely BYU winning the MPSF. So that's 4 teams right there. I believe 2 teams could get into the NCAA tournament. If not, maybe 4. I highly doubt they'll take 4, considering the previous year they had just 6 teams in the tournament. They had USC, and then they had what was it? What's their face? Princeton. Yeah, Princeton. So yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I feel that we'll get 6. It's going to be like the traditional 16 tournament. It's going to be the 4 teams that are automatic qualifiers, and then the 6 teams, or I'm sorry, not the 6 teams, the 2 teams that are at-larges. And it could be any at-large team. It could be UCLA, it could be Long Beach State, it could be McKendree, it could be Pepperdine, it could be anybody. Speaking of UCLA actually did pull off an upset. UCLA did beat BYU this past weekend in 4 sets, which is absolutely amazing. I think that could strengthen UCLA's chances of making the NCAA tournament, because you look at Pepperdine's schedule, they have lost 5 games, but their 2 losses were against BYU. They lost once to UCLA, and then they lost 2 more times to BYU. So other than losing to UCLA, which they lost in 5 sets, Pepperdine's been pretty consistent, if you ask me. Like, they also beat Grand Canyon 3 times this season. And then, unfortunately for Pepperdine, their matchup against UCLA, which was supposed to be played on March 31st, got canceled, which really sucks. I would have liked to have seen UCLA versus Pepperdine one more time. So Pepperdine closes out the season at Stanford on Friday and on Saturday, which I think that should make for a good matchup. It's going to be Stanford's last chance to possibly make something happen, because for those that don't know, Stanford is closing the doors on its men's volleyball program, which really sucks. I am very mad. I'm still PO'd to this day about how they are closing the door on their storied program. It really makes me mad. Just saying. And then you're looking at UCLA's schedule. So UCLA lost to BYU, they lost to USC, they lost to Pepperdine, and then they lost to BYU, which, that's 5 losses. So they lost to BYU, USC, and they also lost to Concordia. So looking at Pepperdine's body of schedule, they've been consistent against the lower level competition. The problem is they haven't really had too much competition with certain teams, because I think their series against USC got canceled early on in the season. I'm not entirely sure. And it really sucks that we don't get that Part 3 matchup between UCLA and Pepperdine, since that could be the barometer of seeding purposes. But unfortunately that is not the case because of COVID and whatnot and uncertainty. Actually, no matchup got canceled for Pepperdine, so just the UCLA matchup. So, really sucks, but it is what it is and whatnot. Like, it is surprising to see UCLA having 19 matches underneath their belts, while Pepperdine only has 16. It's kind of unfair, just because even if UCLA doesn't have any more matches. Like, even if Pepperdine runs the table against Stanford, they'd still be half a game behind UCLA. And what really sucks is that Pepperdine is a half game out, which really makes you wonder what would happen if UCLA and Pepperdine met one more time. Would UCLA be able to get a hold of the Waves, or would Pepperdine be able to strike the Bruins from the undertow? Just some food for thought right there. Speaking of men's volleyball, the AVPA polls the AVCA volleyball polls have been released. So, looking at the top 15, so 15 through 11, 15 is Ball State, 14 is George Mason, 13 is UC San Diego, 12 is McKendree, and 11 is NJIT. 10 through 6, 10 is Loyola of Chicago, 9 is Grand Canyon, 8 is Penn State, 7 is Long Beach State, and 6 is UCLA. 5 through 1, number 5 is Pepperdine, number 4 is Lewis, number 3 is UC Santa Barbara, number 2 is BYU, and the still number 1 team of the AVCA men's volleyball coaches poll is Hawaii, which is no surprise. I didn't really need to do that drum roll, did I? But I am excited for how the NCAA men's volleyball tournament could be turning out, especially with the regular season and how it's going to turn out. Because for me, I think it's Hawaii versus everybody, not just in the Big West Conference, but for everywhere. Whether they're facing BYU, UCLA, Long Beach State, Lewis, the list goes on and on. Like, I don't think a whole lot of teams are going to be slowing down Rado Parupanov and all those other players. But this has been a season of uncertainty, and honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if anything like weird happened. But honestly, nothing is slowing down Hawaii. Like, unlike BYU, however, Hawaii hasn't really had to go through much uncertainty because they did lose, I think, one of their players to injury, and it all depends on if Hawaii is at full strength. And then you also have to wonder what could happen with BYU going forward. Because BYU did lose some players early on in the season due to COVID and due to injury. But I think BYU is starting to somewhat get it together. BYU did recently lose to UCLA, as I just mentioned. So that kind of leaves a sour taste in my mouth. But I don't think it's anything BYU can't handle. Like, BYU will be going in with a loss, but I don't think it's anything to be fully concerned about if you're BYU. Like, BYU is just having a great season, and I don't think they'll be too worried about the MPSF. So yeah, BYU will be going into the MPSF tournament on a 1-game losing streak, and they'll also be the number 1 seed, which is well deserved on their part. I just think they have a great chance, because looking at the MPSF standings, if I could find them, I can't seem to find them. Either way, yeah, BYU finished 17-13. UCLA finished 14-15, which, again, I would have liked to have seen that at one last matchup between UCLA and Pepperdine. And then Pepperdine finished 4th at 11-5. Then Grand Canyon finished 6-10. USC finished 5-12. Concordia finished 3-11, and then Stanford finished 3-13. So, looking at this tournament, I want to say it's going to be UCLA versus Stanford in the first round, and then Concordia versus Pepperdine in the first round, and then USC versus Grand Canyon in the first round as well. And then the winner of Grand Canyon, USC, will get BYU, and then the winner of UCLA Concordia faces the winner of I'm sorry. The winner of UCLA Stanford will face the winner of Pepperdine Concordia. It's tricky because there's only like 7 teams in this conference. It's really confusing, and I'm getting this all off of Wikipedia because there's only 3 teams in this conference and whatnot. So we shall see. We shall see, but it is going to be a fun little MPSF tournament. I really think that between BYU, Pepperdine, and UCLA, those 3 teams can win it. And then you can't sleep on Grand Canyon just because Grand Canyon also has had somewhat of a good year. I mean, obviously, UCLA has had their ups and downs, but I think that UCLA is hitting its stride. So we shall see. But looking at this little recap of UCLA BYU, and that the automatic qualifier will be going to the NCAA tournament. And the tournament will actually be played in Provo, Utah. So in other words, it's being played at BYU, which, high elevation right there. So I can imagine UCLA will be facing Stanford in the first round, if they're going with all 7 teams in the tournament, which I imagine they will. Like, it would just be fair to have all those teams like participate and not leave anyone out, because that wouldn't be fair to like leave Stanford out, like leave them out of, and just like say, oh, you're not in the MPSF tournament. Have a good off season. So there's that. But we'll see. I'll have more information about this probably next week. Like, with all that's going on with like the NCAA women's volleyball tournament, the NCAA men's volleyball action going on that's in the final week of the regular season, the NCAA beach volleyball season that's going on, it's tough to keep up with everything. Anyway, so moving on to some beach volleyball, there were some upsets that happened last year, and there were some interesting matchups that happened as well. I do remember that Florida State lost to to Florida International, which is quite surprising. I didn't think Florida International was gonna lose, and then because I know how good Florida State is, and the fact that Florida State lost is kind of interesting. It's like, what happened? So, unfortunately, the beach volleyball polls will not get released until tomorrow, which again, it sucks, but it is what it is. For those wondering why I'm doing set point today, by the way, it's because I needed to accommodate to Emily and her being a guest, because I really wanted to have Emily back on the show one last time. Like, I think it would have been, it's cool that she's back on as a guest and whatnot. So there's that right there. And honestly, I hope to have Emily on back again. But she's going to be working hard with the Big Ten network and whatnot. And it's going to be fun times for the NCAA women's volleyball tournament. And I do need to go over this, is that Mike Pat, our host for Let's Whine About Sports, and he's also our editor for the IESR blog page, he wasn't happy that Florida State lost to FIU, which he's a Florida State guy, and he was like, boo. So it's kind of funny. Well, not funny for him, but but it is what it is. Like, he'll survive. Like, Florida State is still up there. Like, they're still up there with the likes of USC, UCLA, LSU, and whatnot. I want to say USC's beach volleyball team won a tournament, won like the Pac-12 North tournament, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they went 4-0 in the Pac-12 North Invitational, and they play Arizona State later on in the season, which Arizona State actually upset Cal. So there's that I gotta go over. But I think USC, like I said, USC, UCLA, heck, even LMU could possibly win the NCAA tournament in beach volleyball. It all depends, though. And speaking of LMU, USC plays in the Center of Effort Challenge on Friday against LMU, and then they also play Cal Poly, and then Saturday is when USC has to start playing their A game. They play Grand Canyon, and they also play UCLA, which that's going to be fun. And then USC and UCLA face each other next Thursday at UCLA, which that could prove crucial for both teams, especially in the Pac-12. So, yeah, USC is not started conference play yet, which is quite strange. But for the most part, USC has been pretty much had one-sided matches. Their only blemishes to their season was a 2-3 loss to LSU and a 2-3 loss to Florida State in the Pac-12 South Invitational. So this just goes to show you that if you want to do good in the NCAA beach volleyball scene and you want to win the NCAA beach volleyball tournament, you're going to need to face some of your stiff competition. And whether you win or lose, you got to find your correct matchups, and you've got to hit your strides early and often. Because, again, it is still wide open, and there's that. So before I close the book on the beach volleyball scene, I definitely got to give a shout-out to Kristen Noose. I think that's how it's pronounced. Kristen Nuss of LSU Beach Volleyball, as she is now the all-time winningest player in terms of dual wins at LSU, as she has won 130-plus matches. And it's absolutely amazing. So, Kristen Nuss, to me, is definitely one of those players that's living the dream. She had a dream of playing beach volleyball at LSU, and now she's the all-time winningest player. And she even was grateful that she got the opportunity to play beach volleyball, and she even said that she even thanked her coach for taking a chance on her, and it's absolutely amazing right there. So good job to Kristen Nuss, and she's also partnered up with someone by the name of Teran Cloth, and I like her because she and I have the same name. It's just that her name is spelled differently. Getting off topic here, Kristen Nuss is the all-time winningest player in terms of dual matches at LSU, so I gotta give her a round of applause. So that's absolutely a great thing to see. And I'm glad she's living her dream, and I can't wait to see her in the AVPA beach volleyball scene. I'm sorry, not AVPA, AVP beach volleyball scene. Beach volleyball scene. So it's going to be a fun time, and I'm excited for it. So there's that right there. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Set Point. We almost went 2 hours. My lordy. Time flies when you're talking about volleyball, especially in that first hour. Later on today, we have Adam Karnick and his show, Chi-Town Weekly. That's going to be on at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 6 p.m. Central Time, and he has a guest. His name is Tyler Snipes, and he works for SBI Soccer, and it's going to be a great time, and I can't wait to listen, so we'll see. But on that note, that's going to do it for this episode of Set Point. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm not sure about what next week looks like. I'm almost certain it's going to be another Monday episode, but I'm certain it's going to be at 5 p.m. instead of 11 a.m. 5 p.m. Pacific Time, if we're being technical. But I think next week is going to be a little bit more later. But we have a lot to talk about. There's going to be a lot to talk about, such as the NCAA tournament. By the time Set Point goes live again, the NCAA tournament will be in the round of 16 or the Sweet 16, and honestly, it is going to be a recap of the first round, aka the round of 48. Even though, like, not everyone is playing, I just call it the round of 48. Like, I just call it as a joke. Because, again, I still think it should be 64 teams. But regardless, the first round will be a recap, and then the second round will be a recap, and then we'll also recap what's been going on with the NCAA men's volleyball scene and what's going to happen with the MIVA and the EIVA and the MPSF and the Big West, and then whatnot, and so on and so forth. So there's that. So it's a lot of volleyball to get into. Like I said, normally I would be trying to find more material, but now I've got plenty of material going forward. Something I wish I could have talked about as the NCAA volleyball season was going on was Athletes Unlimited, the pro volleyball scene that Emily Ehman covered. And again, she did a great job with Athletes Unlimited, and definitely do give Emily Ehman a follow. Her info is in the description, but I wish I could have talked some Athletes Unlimited, but who knows? Maybe I'll be able to talk about it like in the near future and whatnot. And then there's also some transfer news that's been going on, but I'm going to save that for next week. But until then, we will be signing off here on Set Point. You listen to episode 85 of Set Point on Monday, April 12th, 2021. And now it is that time, everybody. It's that time to drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you all once again for tuning into Set Point. Thank you to my guest, once again, Emily Ehman, for stopping by and talking about NCAA women's volleyball. I really appreciate having her on the show. We need to get her an IE Sports Radio t-shirt, one way or another. Once everything clears up with COVID, then everything will be back to normal, and we'll get her that t-shirt. So definitely do give Emily Ehman a follow, and Big Ten Volley Talk a follow. For Emily Ehman and everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. Have yourselves a great rest of the day. Enjoy some NCAA volleyball action, because in 2 days, 48 teams will be going at one another, but only one shall remain champion. Or one will be the champion. Who will it be? We'll have to find out. Have yourselves a great rest of the day, and I'll see you Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Peace, everybody.